I guess most of you here know what vegetarianism is all about. Maybe some of you have even encountered vegetarians in your lives. But still, let me ask you a question. Do you think that vegetarians eat fish or seafood? Perhaps some of you know the answer to this question. Unfortunately, when I went to a camp to Italy, I was served a vegetarian meal which consisted of a fish. Or once when I went to a coffee shop in Warsaw and I asked for a vegetarian sandwich, I was offered one with shrimps. So apparently, people who thought they knew what vegetarians eat did not have sufficient knowledge. I also have a friend who thought that the function of a cow, or rather the purpose, is to give milk. She believed that cows naturally give milk. She never took the time to realize that the cows are made pregnant so they can give this milk, and that their calves are immediately taken away from them, usually to end up as veal at the butcher shop. So, of course, vegetarians are allowed to drink milk, but milk is simply unhealthy. As we get older, we lose the ability to digest lactose, and even my non-vegetarian doctors told me to stop drinking it. And yeah, there's the treatment of animals, which has become such a hot subject nowadays. I know there are many people who are aware of the less than perfect conditions that the animals are kept in, but who do not want to know more, as they would feel guilty about eating meat. They prefer to bury their heads and remain ignorant, not to have a guilty conscience. I also know many people who get really upset that in some Asian countries, people eat cats and dogs. But what is the difference? Why a cat or a dog deserves better treatment than a cow or a chicken? Some people cite stupidity as the reason not to care about chickens. But are we really to judge which animals are to live and which are not on the basis of our own subjective criteria regarding their intelligence? The life of animals before being slaughtered is one of constant misery. According to the animals' rights organization Viva, approximately 1/5 of chickens are fully conscious when they are placed in the scalding tank in which they are boiled. Also, 5 hens are kept in a cage the size of a microwave, which is it's even smaller than this box. Also, millions of pigs, calves, and lambs have their throats cut while still being conscious, and they often do not survive transportation because of overcrowding and extreme temperatures. Okay, but I know there are many people who do not care about animals. So there is another benefit that can be gained from vegetarianism. When I say I'm a vegetarian because it's healthy, people ask me, so what's so healthy about it? A meat-based diet is the healthiest one to have. Also, they say, if you say meat is bad, then show us the correlation between the consumption of meat and disease. Obviously, there is no such thing. It's not a matter of black and white. It's not as though eating meat will make everyone terminally ill. Only meat increases such a possibility, and vegetarianism reduces it. However, as you all probably realize, there is a strong link between diet and disease. People who eat fatty foods are likely to suffer from obesity and heart diseases, and are likely to develop diabetes. Firstly, as you know, vegetarians pay a lot of attention to what they eat, and especially vegans who only eat plant-based foods. They consciously choose the ingredients and types of food they consume, so their diets are balanced and diverse, and as a result, healthy. So starting with cholesterol, it is found chiefly in animal products such as meats, milk, or dairy products. As vegetarians eat no meat and no fish, their diets are usually low in cholesterol. And I restate that I'm referring here to a balanced diet. So a well-balanced vegetarian diet includes healthy fats such as monounsaturated acids from olive oil and avocados, to name a few. These are good for the heart and may reduce your risk of a cardiovascular disease. Moreover, Colin Campbell, a nutrition and health researcher from Cornell University, proved in his famous book, The China Study, that people who ate mostly animal-based foods developed the most chronic diseases, and people who ate mainly plant-based food were the healthiest and tended to avoid such illnesses. So we often assume that athletes follow healthy diets, but practically their diets are just one-sided as they consume great amounts of meat, and too much animal-based protein is not so healthy as has been shown in the book, The China Study. And what's crucial here, what I would like to mention, is that Colin Campbell, before he started his research on nutrition, promoted greater health by eating meat, and he believed that high-quality animal protein is the healthiest. So you might still think that athletes have to eat meat to perform well. Indeed, they need lots of proteins, lots of carbohydrates to give them the endurance and strength, for instance, for long-distance running. So, is it possible for a vegetarian or even a vegan to become a professional runner? I guess that you're probably thinking that vegetarians and vegans would never get as good as their meat-eating friends. But this is not true. This year, there were 9 vegetarian Olympic medalists, one of them Lizzie Armistead, who has been a vegetarian since the age of 10. Okay, so having covered up the Olympics, we can move on to the national sports. So, as some of you have probably heard, there was a joke after the cancellation of the Polish-English match that the football field looked like a rice field. But what if we actually planted crops on that field? How many people do you think could be fed from it? Actually, it is 5 for rice, and the number goes up for soy, up to 13, but for meat, it's not even a person. Also, as you probably know, there has been a dramatic rise in the world's population. There are 7 billion people now, and just in a decade, there was a rise of 1 billion. At this rate, by 2050, the world's population will be approximately 9.2 billion. So more people will have to be fed. And as you can see from this example, the production of meat is just not as efficient as the production of plants. Also, we need other resources to produce meat, not just farmland. To produce 1 kilogram of beef, 100,000 liters of water are needed. Yeah, 100,000 liters. So to give you a better perspective, imagine now that this room is filled with water, up to 30 centimeters. And this is 100,000 liters. So yeah, as I said, it would be 1 kilogram of beef. And by using this same amount of water, we could produce 100 kilograms of crops. So, even though there are people who believe that water is limitless, isn't it that 70% of Earth is covered by water? Yeah, that's true, but nevertheless, there will only be enough water for everyone if the proportion of animal-based foods is limited to 5% of the world's total calories. Of course, by 2050. And according to the UN, as the world's population grows, the food production will have to increase by 70%. And now you may wonder why by 70% if the world's population is to rise by 30%. This is simply because of the emerging pattern in developing countries to increase their consumption in general as they get richer, like in China. So eating meat is just unsustainable, and in the upcoming decades, people will simply have to switch to a different type of diet, especially as overeating, malnourishment, and waste are on the rise. I would like to conclude by asking all of you here to consider what you eat, and if it is really healthy and good for the planet. The future will come someday whether we want it or not. So it is simply better to be prepared for some kind of alternative. Thank you.